Hi, I'm Miss Tyler, and welcome back to Context for Kids, Backgrounds of the New Testament. I think this is part 10, but today we're going to do something very different because you know what? It's really hard to know where to get good information on the life and times of Yeshua the Messiah, or Jesus Christ. There's a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of people who write books who are just passing on what they've kind of heard second and third hand, but they're not going back to the source material to make sure they know what they're talking about. Case in point, there are a lot of really funny stories out there. You know, there's a story about when the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies once a year on Yom Kippur. We've talked about that they would tie a rope to his leg just in case he died there. They'd be able to haul him out, you know, struck dead by, you know, God's wrath. It never happened, not even with some very evil high priest in the first century. Well, people just hear that and they assume it's true, but where that came from is a very late, I believe, I looked it up once, a very late medieval rabbinic legend. Something that wasn't supposed to be taken seriously. It was supposed to convey a concept. It was just made up. Well, some people got a hold of that and they started talking about it like it was true. Another case in point, I believe it was Rashi who decided that Dagon was a fish god, and that, you know, the Ninevites saw that Jonah had been spit out by a fish, and so, you know, they went back and this guy just got spit out by the fish, and of course we worship the fish god, so we better listen to what he has to say. Well, total made up story. And we know now from archaeology Dagon is a grain god. He's never worshipped as a fish god. But again, a legend, just a, well, wouldn't it be cool if Dagon of the Ninevites had been a fish god? And this happened, and that's why they listened. That's why they told the story. It's a what if. We all do it. It's not like somebody was lying. Somebody was saying, well, what if, and this is cool. Well, the Jews know how to read that stuff, and people who aren't Jews a lot of times will think, oh, well, they must just be recording history. One more. Sometimes you'll hear that, now this is true, that the Levites raised lambs in Bethlehem for the sacrifices. Now that is true. We know that from Jewish writings, historical writings. But then people kind of get a little funky, and I don't know where this came from. I haven't been able to track it down. They want to tie the raising of the lambs in Bethlehem to the birth of Yeshua even more than it's already obviously linked. So they say, well, they used to take the priest's undergarments and wrap the lambs in them so that they would be perfect and everything. And that's why Jesus was wrapped in swaddling clothes. Well, all babies were wrapped in swaddling clothes. This was not weird. That was indicative of age, not of anything inherently special. Now, why do I know it can't be true? Because the garments of the priests were too holy to ever be removed from the temple. They wouldn't have done it. They wouldn't have taken them and wrapped them, taken them out of the temple, and two, wrapped baby lambs in them. It's just one of those stories. People like to tell stories. When you hear a story, you say, I would like to know where you've got that. Of course, then sometimes you come across people like me who really did read it in a legitimate source, and they say, oh, I've read 200 books. It's in one of them. But usually I'll find it and I will try and get back. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So how do you find out if someone is just repeating what they've heard, or if they've actually gone and looked into the archaeology and looked into the historical records and found it? Remember, it's one thing to say, what if? It's another thing to say that this is true. And if it's not written down somewhere by someone from antiquity, from someone of the times, we cannot say that it is true. We cannot teach it that it's true. We can't, because that's not honest. I mean, we might assume that the person who taught us knew what they were talking about, but that's a big assumption. A lot of people, they hear something when they're young, never occurs to them, they've never verified it. Happens all the time. Happened to me a couple weeks ago, and I said, oh, but then I went and did some research, and you know what, it was true. Whew. I hate with retracting teachings, but I have to do it sometimes. Okay, so we're going to talk about the first century. I want you to know the books, the kinds of books I'm going to be using this year as we talk about the backgrounds of the New Testament for my new book, and I finished my 5th book today, but that one's not for you kids. That one's just for you parents. So, all right, so one of our most important sources, probably our most important sources about the history of the times 200 years before Yeshua and up until the early 2nd century AD is going to be Josephus. Okay, Josephus was born in 37 AD. And so right after Yeshua died, he's from a priestly family. And so he'd been in the temple before it was destroyed. He's an eye-hand witness to the things that went on during those time periods. He was a very tireless historian. And he quotes from books that don't exist anymore, written by other historians about the times. So his voice is one of the most important. And this is Loeb's Josephus. It's a very special type of Josephus, because I'll tell you what the problem with Josephus is. Some of his works were tampered with in the early Christian church. There's this one part in one of his books, and I can't remember where, but he was talking about Yeshua, and he really did write about Yeshua. And he wrote about John the Baptist too, and how everybody in Judea was incensed and just furious that Herod had killed him because everyone regarded him as a righteous man. And bad things happened to Herod, and they blamed it on what he'd done to John. Anyway, so, but there is one spot where he's talking about Yeshua, and after he says, he was the Christ. Well, Josephus didn't say that. He wouldn't have said it. It was just, the manuscripts were obviously doctored later. Much, much later. And so these are the untainted ones. Are very expensive. I was lucky to be able to get a whole set. But anyway, so that's Josephus. There's like 12 of them. And he's very, he's who you want to go to if you want an eye-hand witness. Okay, there are other eye-hand witnesses too, but he was the most prolific of the writers about it. Dead Sea Scrolls. We've talked about the Dead Sea Scrolls. I like this translation. It's called Dead Sea Scrolls, the New Translation, but it's not that new. It's a couple years old now. Michael Weiss, Martin Abegg, and Edward Cook. And it's awesome. And you read the Dead Sea Scrolls and you learn the meanings of a lot of phrases that show up, especially in Paul's writings. You go, is that what that meant? Dead Sea Scrolls. Because the Essenes were there at the same time. They were living set apart from the rest of the Jews, but they were there. And they used the same terminology and the same language, and they influenced a lot of the New Testament writers. All right. The Mishnah. This is Kahati Mishnah, and I just bought the complete set. And this, a lot of people say, well, you know, you can't trust the Talmud. But a lot of times they'll think that they're talking about the Kabbalistic stuff that was written in the Middle Ages, which has nothing to do with it. But a lot of the Mishnah, well, the Mishnah itself is half the Talmud. The Mishnah is all of the legal rulings of the sages, the Sanhedrin, that sort of thing. This one is, this one's Kedoshim. And this one has all the stuff about the sacrifices in it, and wow. And now I read Leviticus and I think, okay, I can see that now. Now it makes sense. But boy, these guys were smart. Anyway, Hillel the Great, who lived in the 1st century BCE, so this is before the birth of Yeshua, he could see the writing on the wall, and he could see that things were dicey. There were messianic pretenders popping up every year. Well, not every year, but often they would start up riots at the time of Passover. and things were getting more and more violent with the Romans, and Hillel knew that at some point that they were going to lose their nation, that everything was going to be destroyed. He could see it, and of course it happened. He knew that they had to get all of the temple rituals, all of the temple architecture, their laws, the way they were doing things in the first century, and well, first century BC for that time. So he got them started writing, and it was finalized in 200 AD. So only 130 years after the destruction of the temple, only 160 years after Yeshua died, this was finalized, not written, finalized. And like, this is really cool. In Tractate Sanhedrin, which is in one of the other books, you actually are reading EJ, oh my gosh. Paul was a member, Paul was an officer in the Sanhedrin court. Something that you wouldn't know without this. This describes a lot of stuff. This explains a lot of stuff that's going on in the New Testament. So this is very important. I use this. Here's a great book that was recommended to me by my friend Ryan White. And this is Everett Ferguson's Backgrounds of Early Christianity. And wow, this is like 600 pages. And it talks about all the things that were going on in the Greco-Roman Empire and with the Jews, and really, really awesome. I highly recommend this book. This is not a book for kids, but you guys aren't going to be kids forever. This is what I would recommend for your first book on first century. And he pulls from Philo and Josephus and all those guys. This is another book that's not for kids, but this is really good, and I'm going to be pulling from this. In the Shadow of the Temple, Jewish Influences on Early Christianity by Oscar Scarsune. Now the thing with these guys, now these guys are obviously modern authors, okay? Oops. Modern authors. The rest of these guys are going to be pretty much modern authors that I'm going to show you. They're modern, but they pull from the primary source material, from original documents and that kind of stuff. So they're not just passing on urban legends, they're not just making stuff up. These are guys who are actual scholars and experts in the field. And if they get, and they quote extensively from people who are specialists in different areas. And if they get something wrong, boy howdy, people are all over them. Geography is important. Before I started studying geography, there was a lot of stuff going on in Jerusalem and on the Temple Mount and the Mount of Olives. I couldn't have even told you where the Mount of Olives was compared to the temple. I can tell you now, I couldn't tell you where Bethsaida, pools of Bethesda. I couldn't tell you where the Pool of Siloam was. I couldn't tell you which direction the temple faced. Couldn't tell you where Mary, Martha, and Lazarus lived. I couldn't tell you any of that. So, Dan Bahat, he's very big name in Jewish archaeology. And this is his Carta Jerusalem Atlas, and you can pick it up for any decent price. It goes through Jerusalem through the ages. It also has the stuff about the Dome of the Rock being there. Really, really good book. Now this is, somebody bought this for me. This is the most awesome book. It's called The Sacred Bridge, Carta's Atlas of the Biblical World, and by Anson Rainey and Stephen Notley. I think maybe it's gone out of print because I don't see people coming out with many new copies. So anyway, this goes through, Israel was called the Sacred Bridge. Why? Because it was the path from Egypt to Asia Minor, which is modern-day Turkey, and Syria and Babylon, which is Iran and Iraq. Okay? That was the trade route. If you were going to do trade, you went through Israel, which was the sacred bridge between all of these areas. As a result, that area was always at war, pretty much, except during the reign of Solomon, where God gave the land rest. So this is just awesome. Not only does it do archaeology, maps, obviously, but it takes you through the battles that were fought, and it shows you where the troops were and all. Oh my gosh, this is so cool. So we'll be using that. The Old Testament Pseudepigrapha, James H. Charlesworth, Volume 1. apocalyptic literature and testaments. What does pseudepigraphic mean? Pseudo means false, like pseudo, a pseudonym. Actually, pseudepigraph is very close to the name. Pseudonym, fake name. Okay, and in it you'll find all the writings that were being done. This is also not for kids, but I just want to let you know where I'm getting information. And you can play this when you're an adult, and if you want to start studying this stuff, these are great, great resources. And I don't want to keep secrets from you guys. It's not like I figured this stuff out for myself. I just read. No one's let me anywhere near any original source documents. I couldn't write them anyway. All right, so you've got all the writings that, there's 2 volumes of this, all the different writings that they were doing from like in the 3 centuries, well, in the times between the prophet Malachi and when Yeshua was born. And the nice thing about these is it has all, they like to do this literature, okay, where they'd call it the Testament of Levi, the Testament of Abraham, the Testament of, you know, and they would like write it as though they were Abraham or Levi or Enoch. Enoch was the most popular. But you can, and a lot of people think that Enoch was written by Enoch, but you can tell from the writing style and from the wording they use that there's no way it was written back there. And plus, book 2 keeps saying this is a parable, this is a parable, this is a parable, this is a parable. So that's apocalyptic literature. It was the most popular form of literature during that time, but it also has things like, Apocalypse of Ezra, and so they attribute these crazy apocalyptic visions to these famous characters. And that might seem, it's like, well, why would somebody do that? It was just a style of Jewish literature. Nothing wrong with it. It's not like they were writing it thinking that anyone would actually believe they're Enoch. Okay? So it was just a way of if I could write a book about the end times, okay? And I would write my take on it and from what I see in the Bible, but it would be nonfiction, but it would also be fiction because I'd be guessing, because I would be stating my beliefs. Well, this is the same thing. They only did it in a more entertaining way under a pseudonym, and they made it more compelling. So they just wrote it in a different way. They did the same thing, but they wrote it in a different way. Okay, these are great. I recommend everyone get these because you can get these, okay, $4 a lot of times, $4 including shipping and handling off Amazon. And this is the Illustrated Bible Dictionary by Tyndale. And these are great. There's 3 of them. And like I said, you can get them for $4 including shipping sometimes. And they were made quite a while ago, which is why they're cheap now. But it's a great starting place. And I highly recommend it if, if your kids like looking, or if you kids like looking through pictures and archaeology and all that kind of stuff. That is a great one to cut your teeth on. Knowing about the temple is very important. This one you'll probably not be able to get a hold of. It's an out-of-print book. It's called Colorful Ceremonies of the Beit HaMikdash. And it talks about all the temple services. Well, why do we want to know about the temple services? Because Jesus talked about the temple services all the time. But we don't understand if we don't know the language. And so, when he says that, went out of my head, never mind. But when he says that I am this and I am that, and come to the fount of living waters and all that kind of stuff. And when he died and they stabbed him and wine and water poured out, well, that would have made sense to people because of one of the ceremonies at the temple, which was called the Beit HaMikdash. So, this one, I just got this one. This one is put out by the Temple Institute, and so it has a lot of really, really cool pictures of what the temple ceremonies would have looked like. A lot of the pictures of the temple are outdated because of research that's been done that shows that the buildings around the temple were much larger but it's really amazing and fascinating. Look at this stuff made of pure gold that they have made for the next temple. Wow! There's so much. Anyway, I just like this little book and the kind of harps and that the Levites would have played and the horns that would have been blown by the actual priests. Very cool. It helps if you can visualize this stuff while you're hearing the stories and not just say, well, what do I think it means? It's better to know what it means. That puts you so close to Yeshua. I love that. All right. The IVP Bible Background Commentary of the New Testament, Craig Keener. The IVB Bible Background Commentary of the Old Testament by John Walton is also really good. Now this one doesn't really, this one kind of just tells you this is how things are. Okay? Which I don't like, but when you're just starting out, and this is responsible information. Not everything's right, of course. Not of anything's right, of course. But that's a good one, and it's fairly cheap. I think it's like 21 bucks for that big, huge book. So that's good. Even better are these. The Zondervan Illustrated Bible Background Commentaries. And this one's by Clinton E. Arnold. And these are really cool. These are expensive. These are what you, this is when you trade in that. I don't trade in. But when you go up to the next level, you get this one. And this one has a whole lot of really, really cool stuff. And this one has like a cross-section of the temple. Shows you different things. What does a shekel look like? What is a half shekel temple tax? That sort of thing. Just occurred to me that I hope that I'm holding this up high enough because I'm not used to this new studio yet and where I have the camera. Anyway, these are really good and they have them for the entire New Testament. All right, 2 more, and I'm sorry if I've bored you to death, but I just want you to know that I take you guys seriously. I don't want to just teach you stuff and you say, well, Miss Tyler says it's true, so I guess we've just got to believe it. You know, last year I mostly just told you stuff, and I would have been more than happy to tell you where I got things, but it was kind of, you know, there was a lot of stuff, and so I'm taking time before this time to kind of teach you what's going on. Now, I like these. Like I told you, Yeshua talks in feast language all the time. I don't remember talking in Purim language, but I just happen to have this one out because I've got to study this for a teaching I'm going to do about the book of Esther. Okay, he has, and I've talked about these already, Philip Goodman, the Purim anthology, he has the Passover anthology, the Shavuot anthology, every single feast, and these are great. He will pull writings from Josephus, Philo, the people of those times, as well as people all through the ages, and tell you, just give you little tidbits. And I like him because if something is a legend, he will tell you. He won't say, well, this happened, like the miracle of the oil story, where supposedly, you know, there was a cruse of oil and they only had enough to keep the lamps lighted for 1 day, but it lasted 8. He says, that is a legend, that was later. You know, we have no reason to believe that it really happened, but it's a cute story. This, got lucky, I got a bunch of these used. This is Rambam's Mishnah Torah. Now Rambam took the Mishnah, which I was showing you before, and he made commentaries on every part of it. That really, really helps. Oh, I was going to tell you about the Mishnah. The reason why I have the Kihati commentary, or I won't read the Mishnah without a commentary, because I'm going to be perfectly frank with you. Unless you already understand it from having read a commentary, the Mishnah without the commentary, people just don't understand what it's talking about, because they'll say things, and it's just like, what? And the problem is when we try to fill in the blanks with what we believe, instead of going through like the Gemara and other books and saying, okay, this is what they're talking about, this is what they mean. It's not self-evident, not at all. It's like a kindergartner, frankly, opening an advanced calculus book and you're just going, this isn't even math. Anyway, Mishnah Torah, this one is Hilkot Beis HaBechira. This has all the different stuff about temple, and it's very cool. Of course, Rambam wasn't right about absolutely everything, but he knows more than we do. So we won't criticize. Plus, he wrote during, he was born in, he died like in, I think he was born in 1135 and died in 1204. So, I mean, he was 1,000 years after the temple and 1,000 years, well, not 1,000 years before that. Miss Tyler's better at math than that. Anyway, so those are the kinds of books that I am studying, and of course there are probably about 50 more that I'm studying to do this with, but I just wanted to give you kind of an idea of what I do and how I do it and how I try really hard to present you with responsible information and not just these really cool stories that we want to be true because it says something that we like. You know what? The truth is enough. We don't have to make up stories. We don't have to make up things to make Yeshua seem more like the Messiah. I mean, he obviously is the Messiah. And I see it, and I'm sure you see it, and I'm sure your parents see it. We don't need to make him more linked to things. We just got to see where he is linked and be grateful that the Father's given us those links. So, next week, hopefully, because I've got my PowerPoints done, but every time I do one of these classes, I did a whole bunch of PowerPoints for the Hasmoneans after I finished. The Hasmonean Priest Kings, not good, after I finished Hanukkah. But then I went, oh no, I can't teach that without teaching who the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Essenes are first, doggone it. So now I had to prepare 3 more, and I'm hoping that I can just present who are the Sadducees next week. And I'm very excited about that, and I'm hoping you're excited to start learning about all the power players in the New Testament so you can understand when people are talking to Yeshua, when they're challenging him, what they're saying, you'll know why they're saying it, what they're doing, what they mean, and it's going to mean a whole lot more to you. And when you're a grown-up, you're not going to be like I was going and not even know until I was like 40 what's going on. You guys, I think you guys are the most important generation who's ever lived. I really do. I say that all the time to my friends. I think you guys are the ones that are going to be the big movers and shakers in history. And so I want you to know as much about the Bible as possible, to know as much about history as possible. Because you guys are going to be doing some heavy lifting. You guys are going to be doing great works. And I want to do my part to take you seriously because you know what? You need to be taken seriously. So, that's it for Context for Kids this week. I hope you like the new studio. Still getting it set up, but I got my little guys. Look at this. Captain America. Anyway, oh, and look, and Luke, and K2SO, and Doctor Who. I'm so excited. Okay, so anyway, as always, I love you. I'm praying for you, and I hope you have a wonderful week studying the scriptures together. You take care.